So get nervous. So you've noticed that as well. So I'm stating it right now. An acknowledgement to the land. Thank you, Anand, for doing that. And here we go. So we start. So I have no financial or other competing interests. So I am a family physician, and I certainly want this talk to be educational, informational, and experiential, and comes from my own experience. And I strive towards these objectives. If, there are days that I sit in my hole forever and I'm unable to come out, even though I have these cognitively written notes and presented on them. So like everybody else, we're all humans. So I greatly want to place that sort of value of all of us being but no experts here. So that's kind of the key thing to remember. And when I do, involve you in some experiential activities, I want to make sure there are no commands, there are only invitations. And so if you don't want to participate, I'm like, nah, this is not aligning with me. Totally okay, right? So this is an invitation. Maybe I'll ask you or I'll invite you to have an open mind. So Suzuki Roshi, who's a Zen monk, who says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities and the experts being done. So maybe we can empty up today and fill it up with whatever flows for us, not necessarily from what I'm saying, but what you're experiencing, and whatever arrives for you today. So this is one of the very popular famous quotes by Gandhi, and he says, there is no path to peace, and peace is the path. So what is that path? What is the way to get to that peace? I guess that's the big question. As I was getting ready for initially when I was invited on this topic to think about it. And because I know, like all of us, we are always waiting for this right moment to arrive and busy doing things. We're all week waiting for a Friday. I'm just thinking, a week for Friday to arrive for that peaceful moment. Maybe we wait for certain, stages to finish in life, and then we might find that peace. But really, this is, often our life is, right? So what do we see here? This is a picture that my son took in Myanmar in 2016, standing on filling up gas on a road trip. I also want to maybe briefly, before all of that, just give you a little bit of my personal story. So I have been living in Ottawa for the last 13 years. But prior to that, I had the opportunity to work in the Arctic, do my residency in Ottawa. And prior to that, I was in Moscow. And so I haven't had a very linear path as well. And it's been very interesting, and I'm very grateful for what it is. And now I live with my family, my husband, and my daughter, who is almost 17, and my son, who is in university in Montreal, so he's almost 22. So this was in 2016. One of the things that we have given to our children and to ourselves is, and have lived a very privileged life because we've had the opportunity to travel and had those experiences together as a family. And so this was a picture from that, and I have them on my phone, and I just love this picture. So what do we see here? I'm just going to have you, I know it might seem very obvious what it is, but really there's something else that you see in this picture that I'm going to invite you. Go ahead.
It'd be a lot of baggage and clutter.
Yeah, baggage and clutter.
Yep.
Right? Full, right? It's full.
Too much.
Too much. Yeah. Chaos. This chaos. Yeah.
Moving fast.
Right? The light, if you look at the background, right? That's like not even visible to us. It's just in the background. So the beauty of the beautiful Myanmar road trip, we can't capture it here whatsoever. And that's how our lives are. So this is sort of our awareness of this mental time travel that we're always on, where we want to arrive, but our mind is, usually in the past, thinking about, ruminating about whatever it is, whatever's happened, our regrets, or planning what's coming in the future, and maybe some anxiety around that. And all of that is not all bad, but it's not often that we are truly in the present, where our body and mind is present together. That's really what mindfulness is, right? So it's the buzzword and you all kind of hear it all the time. That's what it is. That we bring our mind and body to whatever we are doing right now. And so John Kabat-Zinn sort of created the term, and and it's been modified from here in many ways, but this is the basic definition of mindfulness. So you intentionally pay attention to your mind, to whatever's happening, to your body. But you do it with the quality of kindness, curiosity. Because often when you're paying attention, you're quite critical of our silence, because we are usually in that sort of self-critical talk about what's going wrong and how we can read things better. So again, always kind of going in the future and back into the what's past. And there's a good reason behind all of that, right? So as we evolved as human beings, previously our ancestors, our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, continuously and primarily unconsciously assesses for safety, right? Because that's when we had to hunt for food and we had to make sure that we get all the carrots and don't get the stick. And so that's where our nervous systems were created. And, or in another way, you can say that our brains are wired to take in the bad and ignore the good. And common experiences of this are, say you're talking to somebody, you might be at work giving somebody feedback or talking to your child, and there's all the good things that you've said, and then there's one critical thing that you've said, they've held on to that, right? So they're Velcro to the bad and Teflon to all the good backward space. And again, this negativity bias has allowed us to survive. So again, there is nothing wrong with it. But when we mindfully become aware of ourselves, and you're trying to pay attention kindly, we're realizing that our mind is resting on this negativity, making sure that thing happens, so I better make sure this doesn't happen again. So doing it for the right reason, but we are constantly feeding and fertilizing those aspects of our mind that might not be really helping us in the future. For us, when we rest on those conditions, what happens is, unfortunately, when things happen, when life actually arrives at us, which is common and happens, we disengage with everything that is good for us too. So things that actually worked for us. So say you would reach out to a friend, when we're sitting in that deep cold, somehow we forget to even reach out to that good friend. Or we enjoy that walk and we forget to kind of get ourselves physically active and get ourselves out. And we actually maybe lean towards alcohol or, doom scrolling on our phones. Or so we even push ourselves further than into that fold. So what if we were to know the landscape of the mind and become aware of this negativity bias? It's not about being all positive all the time, but it's really being aware where the mind is resting. So every now and then we stop during the day and we said, so where's my mind leaning into? Is it leaning into something that's positive, that is going to be helpful for me. That's going to be that I feel enough. I'm at peace. I'm happy versus this is not enough. This is not going well, or things that can, again, be hurtful to us eventually. So when we become aware of the landscape, then we can have this equanimity of the mind. So equanimity is really being aware of what it is, the landscape. It's like you've zoomed out, right? Because when trouble happens, when anxiety happens, they zoom in. And this cascade of fear starts, of this fear where we go down the hole, like I was talking about, and we disengage, and versus having this ability to see as is and have that bird's eye view and know that I have many good things happening for me, and I'm grateful for those, and whatever's happening is, I'll be okay. So it's like regulating ourselves, our nervous system. So almost like retraining our nervous system from that negativity bias to learning how to regulate it more consciously.
Good. Yep. Thanks.
Worse.
Okay. It's a very broad concept and you get used to it.
Yeah.
But my question is, isn't pursuing enough money to issue by the environment in which we build?
Absolutely.
And so what I'm saying is, for example, to give you an example, the people suffering in Gaza as we speak, in the verge of salvation, their minds are what the equivalent of consent, what they can use in the back. But to take, for example, people from the broader countries who's being a friend of the Norway, and these countries rank highest on the index of happiness in the world. So I'm just trying to see, this is a prayer to make that state look like the Dodgings and the regions are on the same level as the North.
Yeah. So the community, the environment, right, they play a huge role. But we have to know that the nervous system, it's almost like, you have a patch of grass, right, and you cross over, and there's no path, and you decide to walk through it. And it creates maybe no path. And you keep walking that same path, and that path starts to create, right? Like you have a kachana, right? So you make a way out there. And that's how the nervous system is. It's been hardwired, right? The nervous system is what, and that's why we know that mental health, stress levels, whatever they are, you're right, even though we live in a society of privilege, and we have each other, and we have all these things available to us, but the mental health, if you look at those stats, they still exist, right? And we have families across the other lives of, separation, grief, sorrow, all those still exist. So it's not like we're living in silos, or we interconnected. So whether you're watching the news, and that could trigger our nervous system to be in what we call as the sympathetic drive, the freeze and, like drive, that we're constantly in it. And sometimes when we're on that, I'll have a slide about that later, on it for a long time. So you're talking about people in war zones, it's shut down, right? They've been through, their drives are tired, their cortisol, adrenaline, everything is done, and now they shut down. Thank you for the question. So, and that's where it is. The neuroplasticity is what we create those paths. So you walk on that green path daily, in and out, and you create that path for yourself. So neurons that fire together, wire together. So if we were to create those conditions that brought us that feeling of connectivity, more in tune with ourselves, good connections with other people, so regulating, co-regulating, and that would allow us to actually rewire our brain completely. So this is a quote from Viktor Frankl, who is an Austrian neurologist and a Holocaust survivor. So he says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. So when life happens, right? And in that space is our power to choose our response. And then in our response lies our growth and our freedom. But that space can only be created if you're aware of what it is and where we are and of our minds. I had all sorts of notes on the other side, but of course it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. So I'm just going with the flow today. So that's the slide that I was talking about. So we all have this window of tolerance. And window of tolerance is created like as our almost like a safety mechanism, where when we are amongst people we trust, we feel safe, we can really engage with whatever's coming at us. We can be more mindful. We can be more regulated. But the moment we go outside that window, so that's, So the green part, the yellow part. But the moment something happens and we get triggered, we get activated in some ways, as simple as somebody cutting us off while we're going for an important meeting, and we had this, brief agitation, and then we can quickly come back to our window of tolerance. So that could be an example, but not always. But if you're always used to being in those moments where you're always triggered and you're hyper-aroused, where you're anxious, angry, out of control, overwhelmed. Because what happens when you're in a situation when you're not safe, what do? Usually, you want to fight or you want to flee, run. And so that's that red dot. And then when you can't fight and you can't flee and you just stop, when you go into that purple zone. So this is when you're zoned out and you're numb, you're frozen, and your body wants to shut down. And these reactions just take over. And we might say this is for people who are in the poor zone, but that's not true. This is each one of us. Welcome to bring your gaze a few feet ahead of you, or you could close your eyes if that's more comfortable to you. The idea for the bringing the gaze down is really to be able to tune into our minds, into our bodies, into ourselves, where we rest a lot of the sensory organs that allow us to interact with the world, and that's great. But just for now, that we allow ourselves to bring this gaze inwards, allowing our whole body to rest. And sometimes we can let our hands rest on our thighs. Whatever feels comfortable, because what we want is the shoulders to drop and the feet to rest on the ground, flat on the ground. It's like connected to the earth below. There's this softness in the front, and then there's this strength of the back that holds us. And the practice isn't necessarily to pray again, it's to become more aware of the landscape of what is arriving today for me. like we talked about the mental travel time, thinking about what we spoke about or what's coming, or maybe a sense of what it should be. But just becoming aware of the mind and noticing it. It's not pushing it away. It's as if you were sitting lying on the ground, and you were looking up to the sky, and you had clouds, and the thoughts are those clouds. And whatever comes to your mind, you just place it on one of those clouds and watch the cloud. And very often the cloud can dissipate, often it can stay. And that's okay. There's like a flashlight to the headquarters of the body, the brain, that we allow ourselves to become aware of. Noticing if you're holding our breath. So we just sort of allowing the breath to be as easy as it can be. But it might be that you're breathing more consciously. Our feet on the ground as an anchor, the hands resting, shoulders dropped, breathing gently, consciously, the whole body resting on your seat. Nowhere to go, nowhere to be. This is it. If a thought arises, you put it on that cloud and let it float away. Decides to not float and stay, you let it be. Noticing the state of the heart, checking in with the heart that carries maybe the emotions as we practice. I don't like this, I'm irritated, I'm impatient. So the irritability, or maybe there's a sense of calm, maybe there's a sense of peace, maybe a sense of contentment, a sense of gratitude. Sense of peace, I'm enough. The body might call on us for some aches and pains, maybe, on the hip, the knees. We even let them be in our awareness. We allow them to be present, because we're zooming out instead of zooming in. Allowing the whole body and its experiences to be here with us. There's no right, no wrong. It is what it is. So
in this next minute, I'm going to invite the bell again that will allow us to come back to this physical space as we ventured out inward, and now we sort of connecting with our community. Thank you. Just gonna pause for any comments or of any experiences to share. What didn't feel right, what felt out right.
The old analogy of a glass is half full or a glass is half empty is how you see things. Okay, and therefore it's first.
Right.
Two individuals might look at the same situation and one might
100%.
come back because very negative attitude, what we say, it's not too bad, I can manage that. Okay? So I'd like you to expand on that. I mean, is it related to one's personality that you see the same thing in different ways?
The
Or is
question,
it something universal that I come back to my earlier comment, the environment in which you live may condition your mind, look at things more negatively than it's going to be a different one. So maybe you can
so
expand on that.
the question is, how does the negativity bias, how do you distinguish between two individuals? Maybe one had a better life and they might be looking at, or is it an analogy of looking at a glass half empty, half full?
It's not that you haven't had a different life. People living in the same environment.
In the same environment too, but they might have, yeah. So, yeah, we know the studies about epigenetics, right? Those came up from the Holocaust survivors where 3 generations of, so the child who was born 3 generations later is able to feel that hyperarousal autonomic nervous system of not feeling safe after 3 generations. So the autonomic nervous system gets hardwired in our bodies. And so that can be knowing that 3 generations, and again, living in the same house is different, but that can play a role. Attachment, our childhood, our adverse lives, our relationships, our relationship with families, our parents' survival of being from the war spaces, my father was an army officer who was for the Indian Army, and his parents lived in undivided India towards Pakistan, and when they left during independence, they left everything and had to start from the scratch. They came from a very wealthy family and they lost everything. So I can only imagine what his life growing up must have been. He was born in 1937, so he was 10 years old at the time. My mother has a similar thing again. So, I think about those. Do they play a role in my life today? Absolutely. And we can become aware of them. That's one thing, and work towards getting more knowledge about our landscape of our nervous system. Because sometimes we don't even know why we react a certain way, right? And then you're like, wow, that reaction came out of nowhere. And that's considered to be more of a collective, what you say, a collective trauma that it comes from. So even though I might say I have lived a very privileged life, my parents paid through for my medical school and everything, and I arrived, and my husband, my children, so it could be looked upon as a very privileged life, and so my autonomic service system should be maybe perfect, but it's not, and that's a reality. We become aware of it, and like I said, once we become aware of it, it's not to look at it in a negative way. It's just not serving us. And it comes, in simple things like I noticed, and these are examples that people give in mindfulness. You leave your house, say you're going somewhere, and you arrive at that other destination. You have no idea, like where your mind was, right? It's because your default network allows you to arrive at your destination, and that's kind of set. But maybe didn't realize that you had been worried about or anxious about something that happened yesterday or today, and then you suddenly realize, like, wow, like, the moment you become mindful, and how I do that, I'll come back to it. Maybe I'm blabbering a little bit, but I kind of straighten my back in the car very commonly, and I loosen the grip on the steering wheel, because I noticed one time I had pain in my base of my thumbs. And what I would do is, when I'm not being very mindful, I'm holding the steering wheel super tight. And that for me was a signal. There was nothing, there was no arthritis, and I didn't really do any imaging. And when I became mindful of my holding of that steering wheel, and every now and then being more aware and loosening that grip, I noticed my pain dissipated. So it's just a simple example. I'm not saying everything is like that, but so the negativity bias, so there was a big study at Harvard by 2 psychologists, and it was a multi-center study. They gave everybody this app, and they wanted them to, every now and then they would ask them, what are you doing and how are you doing? What are you doing, where's your mind, and how are you doing? And they realized in that more than 40% of the time, almost 50% of the time, if people were engaged in activities that they were not consciously mindful in what they were doing, they were more unhappy. So there was a sense of not being in this autonomic or the default network that rests. And it's shifting, right? We are privileged, and we are shifting that by becoming more aware of it, and then mindfully, kind of the neuroplasticity, building it. I know maybe it was a wrong question. Yeah.
I was just going to enter the conversation about something into mind from a biological perspective. What I read is that our brain, and it goes way back, right, to sort of add to that question. Our brain scans danger every 5 times every 1 second. Like, literally. And that goes back to when we were fighting the saber-tooth tigers, right? And so I think that sometimes it's not a fault, as you're saying. I think it's just that we're wired to actually stand for danger. And it's just that the threat's not saber-tooth tiger anymore.
That's right.
Threats, it could be anything, couldn't it? And that relates to all.
But the brain doesn't know that the threat is different.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But it just brings us back into that same mode. So that's that level of from 0 to 100 we reach quickly. It's because, our body just knows, shoot up to that 100 because you're triggered or activated at this time right now.
This for you?
We can certainly talk more. Yeah.
Indeed.
So, like, this is a nice analogy just of the practice when, if, we know that we're here gathered for Gandhi's philosophy and the meditation that he practiced at all times, and even before, like, the Salt March. And so, of the benefits of it have been there for, many, many hundreds of years, and especially being some of us from the South Asian East cultures, we've seen it growing up. Our grandparents meditating in the morning, maybe not everybody, again, were waking up to that. But some of the analogies that can be helpful, like I was using of the cloud in the practice, is also thinking about the bank of a river. So it's like the water is rushing past and you can't put your hand in and you grasp the river. That's like, because it's ever flowing. There's rivers, there's sticks, there's stones, and there's debris. And they're like our thoughts, our memories, our images, and our worries, and they're all floating by. So we're sitting on the bank and we're just noticing them. So another analogy, if you like, water. How are we doing with time?
Done, both. It's very cool.
Okay. So this is I'm sure a lot of you have read this poem. It's one of my favorite poems. It's the first poem that I came across in my mindfulness journey, and it talks to me every day. So I'll read it loud. The guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This idea of equanimity, right? You're not pushing things away, we're not trying to be super positive about everything, just cultivating things that are helpful to us and not hurting us anymore. And Mahatma Gandhi said, I have so much to accomplish today that I must meditate for 2 hours instead of 1. And so, I always remember my brother. Unfortunately, I lost my brother in 2022, young guy, 54. He was playing badminton. And when he used to be busy, he used to always say, I have no time to breathe, and if I breathe, I'll die. So it's like it's almost like the more we have on our plate, the more we need to sit with what it is. And sometimes, we think we're going in circles and not doing anything, nothing's happening, and I think I'm doing it right or whatever, but it's all a small perspective, right? It's small shifts, a little thing, those glimmers, right? Little things that we can just become suddenly aware of. And we can really see the progress that we are making. There's a mindfulness teacher, Sharon Salzberg, from US again, and she gives this example where, she was wanting to, she practiced for decades, gone to India, gone different monasteries, meditating, and not finding that it's really helping her. And then she dropped one of her favorite cups. And normally she would just have this, like self-critique right away start. It's like, oh my God, you can never get this thing right. And she just said, oh, look at you. And there was this humor or whatever she used with that. And then she realized it's working. Right? There's a sense of kindness suddenly to what it is. And I'm watching myself, because even the self-critique, the thoughts, the dialogue, the radio stations that we tune in our default network, they become the background music all the time. And then we know that, what you resist persists, and what you accept dissolves. So sometimes, because life is coming at us, and I'm really so, distraught about it, and just unable to accept what it is. And we can lie in that hole just so angry at the world for things not being the way they should be. And then we just get up and go, for example. Or we look back, a year later, a few months later, and we realize that there was always those possibilities that we didn't see when we were sitting down the hole. So that takes me to compassion. And that was another very important philosophy of Gandhi. And in the compassion, it's important to have compassion. We have compassion for others very commonly, but little for ourselves, right? But because we want to do everything right, and we might have the best advice for our best friend, but not for ourselves. And in compassion, we have to include ourselves. If we don't include ourselves, it's almost like it's not complete and doesn't really serve. It's like, again, talking about the gym and not going really to the gym. And in self-compassion, so many researchers have talked about it, but Christine Neff, she's a researcher who did sort of call it, I think the West, maybe there was no word for compassion for self, so she coined the word self-compassion. And self-compassion has 3 components. It means being aware that we are suffering. So in mindfulness, we learn, okay, the landscape, okay, this is hard, this is whatever's happening in our lives. But self-compassion allows us to find a way to alleviate that. And what she said in that triangle in 3 components is that once we become aware, we label it. This is like hard, this is anger, this is fear, whatever it is, because acknowledging is often the hardest part. And we kind of go in circles. We have heard the story of 2 arrows. So we just keep complicating life and not addressing, and then somebody just comes and says, "What's wrong? Like, is everything okay?" And then you kind of look back and say, "Oh yeah, I was really upset about that." So labeling as much as possible that emotion, that's kind of the being mindful about it and not over-identifying by that. And then having this, the other side is the common humanity. So we usually, when we suffer, we try to suffer alone because we are ashamed, or, we don't think everybody else is having a good life, they're having a good time, and I'm the only one who's suffering, I'm down in that hole. But what we're really doing is we're having this expectation of ourselves as like this pristine human being who should never do anything wrong or have our life perfect. And that's where, when we, make sure the timer, yeah, thank you. So the self-compassion, the second component is this common humanity, that I'm not alone in this. There are many people who are suffering similarly in my boots, even today, at this time. And the third is the having a sense of kindness. So what would I say to a friend if she was suffering? What would I say to her? How would I say that to her? So that's like having that quality of kindness and helping, being mindful, alleviating that whatever we are facing.
Priya, I have a question.
Yes.
Let's say you are suffering and you identify an emotion as regret.
Yeah.
You are regretful about some stupid thing you did,
Yeah.
or somebody hurt you, you are resentful, you are regretful. And you bring self-compassion. Is it about you condoning yourself or forgiving somebody? How does self-compassion play out?
when you're regretting.
When you are regretful.
Yeah, so regretful, it's a very common emotion, right? Super common. And we're regretting about something that has happened. So we're becoming mindful of it, we're labeling it. But at the same time, again, that component that, you know, knowing that I'm not the only one that this happened with and what happened between us. And then there's a sense of the kindness is this sense of taking it forward, so action. So it's not just sitting with it and, you know, just saying, okay, yeah, this is hard, but actually maybe in that kindness, deciding that what do I need to do? What's the right thing I need to cultivate to do to get out of this space? So there's no point in just knowing about it, right? Because sometimes people feel self-compassion is like weak and it's like this quality that's just like a, you know, kind of at the lower end. But really it's a fierce, there's a fierce component about it. There's action with it as well. So, and that action can be taken in kindness. So, you know, what do I need to do? What would I say to my friend who feels in that regret? Sometimes, you know, the body knows before the brain does or before our mind does. So we become, you know, contracted. That sense of regret or that feeling is tight, right? And the moment you are kind to your friend and you decide on that path of cultivating, what do I need to do? What's the right thing to do? There's a sense of openness, right? Because there's a sense of knowing that I'm doing the right thing. And that's where the body speaks. So the awareness of our bodily sensations, our emotions in the body, they can be felt. And then we soften towards them, we allow them to be. That, yep, this is hard. Rain practice is another practice, very similar in compassion, where we recognize whatever we are facing, we acknowledge it, and there's an investigative is how are we processing it. There's not overthinking about it, right? It's like, how am I doing right now? Not cognitively, but in my heart, in my body. And then offering some kindness and nurturing, that's the end part. I always think about the rain practice as right through the pandemic, you know, we were actively working, and I got a call. I had lost a lot of my aunts, my mother's two sisters, and my dad's two sister-in-laws, a brother, my husband's father, my brother. There was a huge number. It's like, oh boy. So I was doing a clinic, and I got a call for one of my aunt who had just passed away. And she had she was, at the time, there was a lockdown, and she was a wife of a minister in the politics, my uncle, and she was very active in the community and always super like engaged with the community. But when she was diagnosed, she was at the hospital, and they took her from the hospital to the funeral home. There was nobody with her. My uncle was also positive at that time. He hadn't passed away. This was before that. And when I got the news, I was just going into my clinic. I got the call, and I put my phone down, but we were always in this like, you know, revved up mode, and okay, I'm gonna continue with my day. And the manager, who was for whatever reason was standing at my door, she saw my body. And she said, are you okay? Do you wanna take some, like, do you wanna like breathe or whatever? And I said, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm like the super doctor. Like I'm fine. I can just carry on with my day. And I saw my first patient, who was a lovely patient of mine who I'd known for a long time, who knew me very well. And, you know, we had a very good therapeutic relationship. And I broke down in front of her. You know, that my body gave way. It's still sort of, my heart still kind of bumps with that a little bit. But so I knew I had to leave. Luckily, I had residents and my clinic was taken care of, and I was very fortunate, again, privileged. And I went home and there was nobody. I have the fortune of having a little outdoor space, and I didn't even go inside the house. I just sat outside. And I visualized my aunt and her funeral. So what it was a RAIN process that I learned that I was doing at the time, that I had no idea that I was actively recognizing exactly what I was feeling and staying with it. When I'd gone to see the patient, I had pushed things away. But I think so RAIN is recognizing where you are and you're acknowledging. A is you're acknowledging or allowing it to be there. And investigating is, again, not overthinking about it. I wasn't overthinking. I was literally in my mind, so when I say my mind, it was like this sadness of her being alone. And then giving myself some kindness, offering it to my cousins, her children. She had 2 kids in Singapore who couldn't travel. 1 kid was in there close to her. But it was just a sad situation. So there was like this need to, for me to stop at that time. And we do that, but it's just an example that I went through and I recognized in myself, even though I used to talk about it and I would practice it, but that for me was a great example for myself, what I practiced that day. So we know some breathwork techniques as well, right? We bring ourselves when we feel that anxiety, and we want to bring our peace and inner harmony when we feel agitated. Diaphragmatic breathing, which is basically, putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And as you breathe in, you allow the hand on the chest to be as is, and then the hand on the belly, you can feel it fill as you breathe in. And you can usually, the best way sometimes to try it is when you're lying down, but sitting is also a good way to doing it. And then again, as you exhale, you notice the muscles of your abdomen kind of going in, and the hand on the chest doesn't move. So that's diaphragmatic.
Can we all try it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's all try it.
Okay, so bringing one hand to your chest and one hand on your belly as you breathe into the count, breathing in. And you can breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth, whatever feels right. But it's like filling your chest and filling your abdomen and noticing the hand kind of going outwards. And then as you exhale, you notice the hand going in and leaving the hand on the chest as is. The 4-7-8, I think I was asking some of you if you wanted to do that. So the idea being inhalation to a count of 4, holding the breath for 7, and exhaling for 8. A lot of us are experts in pranayama here, I'm sure. So I'm sure I'm not teaching many of you here. So this is just some examples, Alternate nostril breathing. The 5-finger breathing, it's like a multi-sensory breathing, where you take your hand and you're really feeling anxious. And you could start from your pinky, and as you inhale, you're going up, and as you're exhaling, you're going down. As you're inhaling, you're going up, and as you're exhaling, you're going down. So these are like little things that when that sort of noticing the body a little bit stressed out, anxious, it's not certainly magic or anything, and it takes time. And sometimes we have to do it a few times to actually feel that heart racing just slightly less. Believe it or not, some of these are used before surgery. Some places have used this. So it's like, I'm talking about like some science behind them. The Brahmari pranayam, I'm sure you guys know the bumblebee, that is just amazing, right? Yeah. So, if for those folks, I'm sure most of you know this, so as you, it's like this is again activating the vagal tone, the parasympathetic, the resting and the relaxing part of our nervous system. As we inhale, so we put our thumbs on the tragus, so the front of the ear, and then the rest of the fingers fall across our face. And as we inhale, like through your nose, but when you're exhaling, what you're doing is you're closing your ears and you're humming at the same time. So I'm gonna give it a shot. So breathing in and so needing a few of these to, again, whatever works for you, right? Something, when you're feeling good, we build on that muscle. So we don't go to the gym and pick up a dumbbell and then we say, why is my bicep not done yet? What's happening? So we need to lift that dumbbell many times to really build that muscle. So a good time to practice and build that muscle is when things are doing good. When we're doing good, we're feeling well, we're co-regulated, we're in that window of tolerance, we're feeling safe, perfect time, feeling mindful. Let's practice that. And could be a routine that you might decide to start, or maybe you already have one. The best way to start a new habit, you attach it to an old one. So brushing your teeth, for example, they say I try to do that, stand on my one leg and do my tree pose as I brush my teeth. So it's just to remember my balancing things. It might be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is. But it's something that allows me to build on that. So, sorry, so it's good to, when we are making new habits, it's nice to attach it to another habit or what we already do. So, so say, I was giving an example of the brushing my teeth, and I can do a tree pose, or I can, do a little quick check-in with how I'm doing. Some people I know, like I listen to different podcasts and again, in wellness, some will say I put my coffee, like while the coffee is being made, that's my time to do this. So when you're making, say, your chai or whatever, like that's like, because that's what you do every day already. And you build on that by something that you really want to cultivate in yourself, in your new habit. And it's versus like taking out time for something else, in our day. It becomes easier, I guess. Yeah. So, emotional freedom technique. So some would call it tapping. And again, they're all forms of tapping. And if you go onto certain health websites, you'll see it as well. It really is, so say I'm having a problem right now, so I acknowledge. This is based on Chinese medicine, so it's based on the meridians, and we're trying to bring energy back into the meridians. So I don't know too much about Chinese medicine, but it's just an example. It's a modality, not an example, it's a modality that is, again, there's mixed reviews about it, but there is some evidence around it. And the tapping, we can try it as well if you guys are up for it. So it starts with really, first of all, maybe spending a minute or so acknowledging whatever, if there is something that is bothering you right now. And it could be simple, right? It's not something too deep that'll trigger or activate us and feeling like really sort of, just something small. Why can't I get just something you're waiting for a friend to call or something as simple as that. And then, so acknowledging the concern, and then kind of the proper process of doing that is like, how do I feel about it out of 1 out of 10? So say I feel 5 out of 10 for this problem that whatever the concern that I have right now. And we start with the top meridian. So actually, sorry, first we start with the outer palm, under the pinky, and we go a few times with our other hand. So just the tips of our fingers. We tap a few times.
And go.
You can count, and usually, so they say there's a count of 3 to 4, but I know it's sort of, I'm doing it so that everybody gets to see it. And then we start with the center of the head, one side, so maybe 4 to 5 times. Then going towards the inner eyebrow. You could choose one side, no problem. Outer eye, below the eye, below the nose, below the lip, below the collarbone, and below the armpit. Again, remember, these are invitations. There's nobody, you're just trying them out, right? Trying them out. And even noticing sometimes like, I don't like that. Okay, I like that. Or, yeah, that works for me. That doesn't work. Anything of that, we're investigating our minds. So this was a video I'm going to take. So the last practice was, I was going to do a dyad practice. So again, this is totally voluntary again. There's a sense of confidentiality, there's non-judgment, respect, and staying in the role. So I'm going to invite you to sit with somebody that maybe you know a little less of. You know, maybe like somebody pointed out that we're all a big community, and which is wonderful, and we all know each other. But it might be maybe you haven't haven't spoken to them for a long time. And what we are going to do, I'm sure you're all eager to say, what are we going to do? What is she asking us to do? So this is a compassionate sharing, right? So it's like if you maybe have this person and you're remembering, so one person talks at one time, and we'll give 2 minutes for that. And the idea is that we share a situation where we had a difficult emotion. You know, we're talking about it, we're just practicing. And how does it feel to be in that role of sharing? So, with no judgment coming from the other end. And for the person who is listening, is offering kindness. And there is no advice. That's the most important thing. There is no advice. There's nothing to fix, right? There's nothing to fix. And we are listening without interrupting in those 2 minutes. 2 minutes is not hard, right? Just 2 minutes. We could say, maybe at the tail end, yeah, that sounds hard. And thank you for trusting in me. You're not alone. Thank you. And then we'll reverse the role. So the person who was talking will share. How do you guys feel about that? Are you up for it? Maybe, maybe not, yeah? Okay, let's try it. So you could again, and if you decided to just try it with somebody you know and you don't want to move, that's okay too. It's nice when you don't know somebody and you just sort of, you know, or then you feel less of that concern and worry. So maybe we could end the sharing by saying thank you for trusting me, and that I'm so glad it worked out for you. And then we'll reverse roles. So the listener will be the talker, the sharer, the one listening will the other way.
Yeah. Like that. Yeah, that's what
I'm going to let you end that sharing. And we're going to thank you for sharing. And I'm so glad it worked out for you. So thank you, the volunteers, thank you very much. And for the others, the supporting, right, who have supported the volunteers. So thank you to everybody. So, any reflections, any group sharing, what that experience was, not necessarily about, of course, right? Not about what it was, or, but if you had like, you wanted to share what you shared about and what came to you, that's okay too. But just more of how was it to be the one sharing in the first scenario and knowing that I know 2 minutes is not enough, but there is somebody giving that undivided attention to what you're feeling and saying, and at the end of it, they're also not offering you any advice. They're just saying, yeah, that's hard. They're acknowledging what it is. And then being a listener, so the other side too, how was that for you to not interrupt or not give advice or not just say, I had something similar to that, because that's what we do, right? When we listen to other people telling them about what's happening in their life, we already have left the building and we're thinking in our minds about what happened to us. So the wealth in compassionate sharing is huge. So I'll let people, if there's anything anybody wants to share that came up for them, and it doesn't have to be also, we can just continue. So really what we did is this co-regulation, right? So once we regulate our own minds, we find our landscape, we cultivate, we can make our minds so like still water that beings gather about us, that they may see, it may be their own images, and so live for a moment with a clearer, perhaps even a fiercer life because of our quiet. So that's the co-regulation. And that's what this Sangha, this community that Anil and this everybody else, has created for the super noble cause for Gandhi's legacy. So I am so grateful for your patience, and I look forward to your questions, concerns, or things that you didn't like or things you liked very much. And I look forward to other next talk on June 15th. There is a talk. I thought I saw, yeah. So look forward to that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
In Ottawa, do we have any compassionate groups where they practice group compassion? You know many?
I'm sure there are. There are many online. And I mean, I've held compassionate series various times. It's a series like of four once a week, 4 sessions or 6 sessions. But it certainly is a great opportunity that if there is an interest in mindful folks around, to actually be able to create that, that certainly is an opportunity. But I'm sure there are many. And there are also, so some of the psychologists, some of the psychotherapists have even group sessions, and they're covered by OHIP, believe it or not, also, that those could be offered too. But again, if you wanted to create something with people around you who you know and create that from from within, that's a good possibility as well.
You wrote and a question here, please go ahead.
Yeah, she says that we should look at the compensation.
How it
Mindful compassion, yeah.
it's kept that.
And that's different. Yes,
Different, I'll get you. I think there are different community centers, and there's various wellness series that are held in many places. I think there was a question.
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes of questions and answers. Please feel free.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Could you say something about the medical school education? Or I would think that for physicians and nurses in emergency
Yeah.
and intensive care,
Yeah.
that training in mindfulness would be something that would be part of the curriculum. Will you speak to that?
So there is, and that's the session that I was talking about in the first week, that there is a mindfulness session. And I was part of the mindfulness committee in medical school here at University of Ottawa. There was a mindfulness group that held for the undergrads, at least for them. But I know that in all professional schools, there is mindfulness curriculum. It's part of accreditations now. So, that's where things, when they become that, they become more important. Because people like Amisha Jha, who is from Texas, did a lot of studies around veterans. So there's a lot of knowing how people coming back from wars helped, how compassion and being mindful helped them decrease their stress levels, and knowing that working as a healthcare provider is very much similar, not to that extent, to that, and can be. So that's where majority of the medical schools have a curriculum with mindfulness, yeah.
Fajit, you had a question?
I thought I'd sort of offer the fact that there is a beautiful Shambhala. I don't know if it's beautiful, but the Shambhala Meditation Center.
That's right.
So it's on the part. They have a lot of droppage classes. Folks are doing
You heard it?
it's called Shambhala Meditation Center. That's the only one I do.
And you write those two yes.
Yeah, I think it's we want to make, if you desire to certainly go for things that are accessible, sustainable, or try out, what works for you, and yeah. But there are multiple resources around the city.
So, thank you very much for your message.
Oh, sorry.
How can we change negative thoughts keep everything so
Yeah.
how can we?
So it's true. We can't necessarily change them, but when we become aware of the negative thoughts, when we fill that, so it's like a salt, a teaspoon of salt in a glass of water, a teaspoon of salt in a bucket. That can we, and it's not necessarily, I understand it's not that easy, right? And that's what it is. That's the hard wiring of our nervous system. It doesn't make it easy, but we can work and we can cultivate things to be, first of all, be aware, aha, is that a thought that is kind of, negative, or maybe I want to say hurtful to me? Is it hurtful to maybe somebody else? And how do I feel in my body when I think about it? Like when we do something not nice, that sort of sense of whatever we feel here is like everything is tight and closed, versus when we do the right thing, where there's a sense of openness. So it's to be aware that there is a negative thought and then work on bringing in more. So it's not an easy thing for sure, but with time, we hardwire it.
So does meditation help?
Meditation helps for us to become aware of the landscape of the mind. So it doesn't. So that's why it is not okay to. The meditation can be different. It can be focused meditation. There's walking meditation. There is natural awareness. There is you use a particular anchor. So there are various ways to meditate, but the idea is not necessarily to push things away, because then they'll just, but it's to acknowledge them, see them, and often they dissipate.
What is walking meditation?
What is barking?
Walking.
Walking. Sorry, barking. So walking meditation, so we know that remember we talked about the emotions felt in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of, now we know that somatics have come from there, right? So even during a psychotherapy session with a client of mine, like I will not necessarily expect them to sit on that chair all the time after we've spoken about something really difficult. It's totally okay to just get up and stretch and maybe move a little bit or do something. And the idea is that you move that energy a little bit. But in mindful walking, it's becoming aware of it can be as slow as becoming mindfully aware of how our body is moving, how we're stepping on the ground and touching the ground. Or it could be just a mindful walk when you're walking in the garden, that you're not thinking about work, for example, right? You've gone for a walk, now you're thinking about work and missing out on the scenario altogether, to what this beauty could do to stop and pause and allow us to basically unhook, right? We're on loops of our thoughts. So how do I unhook myself? I do it with my daughter all the time. 16-year-old in the car. We do this. Look at the sky. Her mom. But it's the idea is to break that thought of looking in awe of the nature. And so it could be in nature, the walking, but it also could be our being aware of our own body as we move the body on the earth. So it could be any of those.
You can do this at home?
You can do it at home. So when I went for those meditation sessions in 2012, it was done in a church, because that was the only place available. And there was 20 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of walking meditation, and 20 minutes of somebody would decide to talk about something. And in that, we would mindfully walk in that church and it was the idea of, and you also had to become, so it's like noticing as you're walking in line that the person in front of you, because the judgment is like, oh, walk fast, right? You're like, already, you're not mindful of your step when you're moving into what the scenario is happening.
When I'm walking outside.
What's the question?
Oh, sorry, I think she was not done.
Oh, you are not done?
Yeah.
When I'm walking outside
Yeah.
for half an hour, it's good.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Thank
And I think that's the important thing, right? Like I think it's that glimmer, that gratitude to self, to say, wow, I'm doing that. Because we are often very hard on ourselves. I am not doing enough. I am enough. I am doing enough. Right? Because it doesn't serve us to put that whip on ourselves and say, I better get more, an hour into it. So yeah, I would say yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You first?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your some. Also, just want to ask you, I might have missed, I missed the briefly part. For absolutely demand, where should we start? Check up if you work my list, the practice your mindfulness we want.
So, there are apps. Insight Timer is an app and it's free. There is a paid portion to it, but you don't have to. There are all sorts of apps, and I've tried a lot of them. There's Calm. There's I tried another app called Open. What Open does is it because when you go to these Insight Timer like apps that are not maybe we go into this, it's quite overwhelming because there's so many options. But I see it as a option to sometimes you don't like the sound of the person, you don't like their accent, you don't like something, it activates in you and you say, I don't like that, so you switch. But if you find somebody that you connect with on that, there is an opportunity on that app to say, I want to do it for 5 minutes, and that's all I'm going to do. So don't do it when you're driving, right? But the otherwise, rest of the time, anything, and again, what I said, build on a habit where you're already doing it. So, making food or whatever, not food, but something that that you're not fully engaged in that time, I'm going to practice it. So that's one way of doing it. There's also YouTube, multiple sources there. And the fellow who created, John Kabat-Zinn, the term mindfulness, so if you Google him, he's done retreats for Google, for example, and he has an amazing, that is on YouTube. So that's one of the first videos long time ago that I had seen, and it's quite interesting to dive into the concept and understand it. But again, try not to cognitively think too much about it, right? The practice is a little bit of, going small steps and building on it. And that woman I was talking about for the veterans, where Amisha Josh, she looked at 12 minutes of doing it daily could, decrease rates of, again, mild anxiety and depression. It doesn't switch the medical advice and all of that, but it can help in that. Yeah, welcome.
So you were asking a question, last question. You.
Oh, that was good. The person who talked about walking meditation.
Oh, yeah.
I was asking what is walking meditation. And I realized walking meditation or sitting with the breath or walking and trying to see the steps that come on. It helps a little bit stop the rumination.
Yeah.
When the mind has come back.
Yeah.
And about what to start, I started years ago with John Kabat-Zinn that I am asked how you show yeah, you can have the 10 minutes to start 5 or the 10. Then if the body start and the skin meditation and the long period you spend really had great at the end. That's YouTube.
And I'm also happy to put together some of the resources online and forward it to Anil, and he can forward those as well. So I'm happy to do that. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. How can I get rid of getting
Great thoughts.
bad thoughts? Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Thank you. So it's very much so, right? Having the negative. And what is bad? I think that we can also look at it's the same thing about having that you talked about regret, anxiety, sadness, grief. Having I think it's to be curious about it, investigate about it, have some compassion for yourself about it. Maybe there's a part of you that is suffering in that, where whatever you're feeling, having those bad thoughts, it's to give it space a little bit, So, because when we do have that, we're often told, don't say that, don't do that, when we push it away. And what we're doing is, but it's not going away, right? It's not going away by doing that. So we are allowing it to stay and give it some kindness, giving it space, and space in the sense of being curious about it. Like what, and again, investigating it a little bit of maybe there is a good reason why I have that thought. Because often, who defined it that it's a bad thought? Maybe there are no bad thoughts and no good thoughts. It's the circumstances that makes it so. So that's another thing, right? So who's defining it to be a bad thought? So I would be curious about that. I would offer it some kindness to, like if something wrong has happened and then you're generating a bad thought about it, you're generating from your circumstances. So it is to be curious about why it's showing up for you and why is it showing up again and again. So giving it some kindness will allow it to answer your own question sometimes. And of course it helps to talk to a friend, right? Talk to a friend who you trust about what it is. Or, where you feel this is a safe space that you can express. Because sometimes writing is also good. Recording on the phone, whatever way, because sometimes we are restricted in what we want to even bring to our mouth. But sometimes it's easy to just go ahead and journal and write about it. But what you're doing is you're allowing another way to express it.
Is the solution? Is this the solution?
It could be. I'm not sure 100%. I only strive. But I think it's a way to,
I think someone might have just given us a new way to meditate. She said barking meditation.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we try it? Like women have these bad thoughts. Can you just go?
So believe it or not, there is something called as gibberish meditation. I don't know if people have heard that or not, but there is a very much so a gibberish meditation that is, I'm not going to dive into that, and I don't know very much about it, but there is where people come together and talk gibberish for a few minutes and then go silent completely. So, there's you could YouTube it, gibberish meditation.
Yeah, it's the same.
Thank you. Okay.
So as we come to the close of the session today, I want to say a heartfelt thank you. First and foremost, thank you to Dr. Priya Gaba. You gave us so much to reflect on. Your calm presence, your insights, and your guidance made this a very special experience. You helped us slow down, breathe, and look within. We are deeply grateful. Thank you all for all of you who came today. Your presence means a lot. You made this a space of peace, respect, and learning. Together we lived a small part of Gandhi's message. And thank you to the volunteers and the NDPCO team. You helped make today smooth and welcoming for everyone. Before we go, I would like to warmly invite you to our next session, Non-Violence, a Path to Conflict Resolution, Transforming Aggression into Understanding. You can already feel so much peace in that title. Our leader for that session will be Manjeet Bassi, sitting right at the back. I heard her talk about 2 years ago, and I became an instant fan of hers. She is a spiritual talker, so you will see for yourself. So don't miss it. Please go home and register for the session. Then we will together talk to one another.